Welcome, brave souls, to a spine-chilling journey into the heart of darkness. Prepare to be haunted, startled, and thrilled as we dive deep into the eerie abyss of all things Halloween and horror. Whether you're a fan of ghostly tales, bone-chilling legends, or simply revel in the macabre, you've come to the right place. Join us, if you dare, as we unlock the gates to the most terrifying Halloween experiences and unearth the darkest corners of horror history. Strangely, this occurred October 31st, 2008. I was 14 years old and recall being very pleased for that year's Halloween because it happened on a Friday, allowing us to stay out later than usual. I planned to go trick-or-treating with my friend Matthew, then return to my house for a sleepover. We quickly put on some cheap costumes and headed out trick-or-treating in our neighborhood, which was always the worst because we lived in this forested area where the houses were really spread out. We probably had to walk a good quarter mile between each door, but at the same time, Matthew showed up at around 7 p.m. My dad lived with me and worked night shifts as a security guard, so he was going to be gone pretty much from sundown to sunup, leaving Matthew and I to do our own thing. Of course, we'd see other trick-or-treaters as we walked between houses, but not as many as you'd think. There weren't all too many kids living in the area. We've been trick-or-treating for about 2 hours when I noticed someone following us. It was either a grown man or a really tall kid. I couldn't tell. He had a Michael Myers mask covering his face. At first, I thought he was just trick-or-treating like everyone else. But he didn't have a bag to hold candy, and it was just him. It wasn't like he was with his kid or anything. I told Matthew about it, but he wanted to keep going. He reassured me that if the guy kept following us, we could go back. So we continue hitting houses. But the guy did continue to follow us. Something I picked up on pretty quick is that he wasn't even walking up to the house's front doors to get candy. He stayed behind us again. I told Matthew this time. I could tell he was a bit more on edge. Coming up was a shortcut through the woods which led directly to my house. We took it sprinting. As soon as we entered the woods, we had no idea if we were followed, but either way, we immediately started locking all the doors and windows. When Matthew started yelling downstairs while I was upstairs shutting my bedroom window, I hurried downstairs to find him standing next to the living room window. When I asked him what was wrong, he didn't say anything, but instead pointed outside the window. Squinting, I followed his finger as my eyes grew accustomed to the darkness. When Matthew told me that the man wearing the Michael Myers mask was standing outside, I initially believed that he was attempting to frighten me. However, when I turned around, I discovered that he was actually standing deep inside a forest, partially hidden by a tree. I remained still and walked to the kitchen to get the phone. When my dad answered the phone, I told him that there was a stranger outside watching the house wearing a Michael Myers mask. As I was looking out the window, I said, "It's probably just some teenager trying to scare you. Make sure all the doors are locked and ignored him." This was not the response I was hoping for, but I thought maybe he was right. When Matthew and I went upstairs to my room, we tried our best to forget about it, but it was pretty much all we could think about. We started to make excuses, but the sound of breaking glass downstairs cut us off, and my heart began to race. The phone was back downstairs, so neither of us knew what to do. We turned off the light and entered the closet, where we shuffled to the way back, honey, behind hanging clothes out of view. The next 5 minutes were completely silent, but then footsteps entered the room, and I could feel people walking around. That's when the closet door slowly opened. A full minute must have passed of just nothing before Matthew screaming as I was yanked out. Matthew was being wrestled to the ground, but in the struggle, the guy dropped his knife in a matter of seconds. Matthew was pinned down. I grabbed the knife and immediately stuck it in the back of the guy's thigh. I fell on his side, screaming in pain. Matthew got up and we started running downstairs. We went outside and sprinted to my neighbor's house. When we got there, we banged on the door until they answered. We explained our situation, and they let us inside as they called the cops. To make a long story short, the cops didn't find the guy. He was missing from the house. When they arrived, there was nothing to show for the encounter but a broken window and a missing kitchen knife. They looked for a blood trail, but never found one. I received no injuries, but Matthew wasn't as lucky as he was struggling with the guy. He received a cut down his arm. You've been today. I still think about that night when I was 19. I lived at home with my parents. This happened on Halloween. And like every other year, my parents had me hand out candy to the kids that came by. I didn't mind. Our living room was right next to the front door, so I just put on a movie and get up whenever the doorbell rang. It was about 10 p.m. The doorbell rings were slowing down by this point. Both of my parents had gone to bed, I remember this almost perfectly. I was on the last scene of The Dark Knight when our home phone rang. I looked over to the left with the phone's sad unknown caller. That's all it said now, literally. Just the other day we got a new set of phones. We were given a new number and hadn't given it out to anyone yet. So I doubted it was someone I knew. But I still thought I'd answer it just in case. I picked it up. Hello? All I could hear was heavy breathing, so I hung up. I figured they had the wrong number. Shortly after the phone went off again, it said the same thing, a mystery caller. I took it up once more. Once more, a male voice responded. "Who are you?" Pause for a moment. I was beginning to understand that it was probably simply a prank caller trying to get my attention. In light of the fact that it was Halloween night, I can't even blame them. But on the other hand, that's something you'd anticipate from a young child, or, at most, a teenager. And from the sound of it, whoever was on the other end of that line was much older than a teenager. After receiving 6 or 7 more calls in the following 10 minutes, I finally picked up the phone once more. This time, I kept quiet. There were a few seconds of silence before the man began speaking. I'll be honest and say I can't recall exactly what was said, but it involved the man being outside our house and me having to unlock the back door so he could enter. He also allegedly threatened to kill everyone inside if we called the police. By this point, I was pretty sure this wasn't a prank call. I told him about all the phone calls. When we got to the back door, he unlocked it and stepped outside without hesitation, firing one bone into the air. As soon as he did, 3 men emerged from a row of bushes next to the house and started running into the forest behind our house. My dad tried to catch up with them, but they were much faster than him, and they quickly vanished into the trees. We never saw them again, and we have no idea who they were. I was 18 years old when this occurred on Halloween of last year, and my best friend Michael was 17 years old. We both knew we were too old for trick-or-treating, but we also knew that no candy wouldn't be any fun. That's when Michael came up with an idea. There was this old abandoned house that was close to mine, and we always said we explore at some point. We figured what better night than Halloween. We waited until it got dark, and then waited even more until there were much less trick-or-treaters outside. That's when we grabbed a couple flashlights and headed out. It took us a few minutes, but eventually we got to the house. Of course, since it was abandoned, it was a huge mess. Trash was scattered across the floor, windows were boarded up. You can get the picture. We walked into the front door, was half expecting it to be locked, but it opened side was pitch black. We stepped inside. Our flashlights didn't light up much, so we did the best we could in looking around. The house had 2 floors. We explored everything on the bottom and didn't find anything interesting. So we went upstairs up there, and we immediately saw 2 rooms. Michael went in the one on the right, and I went in the one on the left. I started exploring it, looking in drawers in the closet, still nothing of interest. I remember I was looking out the window when blood-curdling screams shine out from the other room. It was Michael. I ran over to the room he was in initially. I didn't see anything that was, until I put my flashlight in the back left corner. There was Michael. But he had an arm around his neck. Someone wearing all black with a Halloween mask had Michael in a chokehold. I could tell his face was turning red. So I did the only thing I could think of. I threw my flashlight as hard as I could at the person. I managed to strike him in the side. He'd let go of Michael and shouted out in pain, holding his side now. With no light, we ran downstairs. We managed to stumble out of the house in the dark. When we got out, we ran, but not before looking back, lit only by the moonlight. We saw 3 figures standing in the upstairs window looking down at us, all of them wearing that same Halloween mask. We turned back around and ran even faster. We finally stopped when we made it back to my driveway. I bent over, breathing heavily. Neither of us knew what to think or do. We had no idea what we just came across later that night. Michael told me what happened when he entered that room. He got in there and started exploring it like every other room. After a while, he noticed something in the corner, shined his flashlight at it, and saw that it was a Halloween mask. He walked over to it thinking it was propped up against the wall. It slightly moved, and that's when he realized it was a person. Screamed down, but was quickly put in a chokehold. That's when I came, and what disturbs me most is how Michael described being held. He said that whoever was in the mask had to have been using all their force on his neck. He wasn't just being restrained, he genuinely couldn't breathe for the good 20 seconds. Or so that he was held there. Like I said before, we don't know what we came across, we don't know what those guys were doing, but we both agree it wasn't something we were supposed to see. I truly believe we were almost killed that night. Don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell, because you won't want to miss a single frightful moment on this channel. Share your own terrifying tales in the comments below and let us know what sends shivers down your spine.